A red powder, 6,000 years old, crossed the Atlantic in Columbus's ships, moved through Ottoman markets and monastic gardens, and somehow became the defining symbol of a nation that had nothing to do with its creation. But the strangest part of paprika's history is not the distance it traveled. It is that somewhere between the Americas and Hungary, it completely lost its fire. Long before the first European ship appeared on the horizon, the story of paprika began in the hands of indigenous farmers across the Americas. In the river valleys of central Mexico, people were already tending Capsicum annuum over 6,000 years ago, coaxing wild peppers into something new, bigger, brighter, and more flavorful than their ancestors. Archaeobotanical finds at Huaca Prieta on the Peruvian coast revealed charred pepper seeds dating back more than 7,000 years, evidence of ancient fields where chilies grew alongside maize and beans. Far to the north, at Casas Grandes in what is now Chihuahua, carbonized pepper remains from the 13th century show that the plant had become a staple in the diets and rituals of the region's people. Throughout Mesoamerica and the Andes, peppers were more than food. Maya cooks ground them into pastes for feasts and ceremonies, while healers used them to treat coughs and wounds. In Aztec markets, dried chilies were traded by the basketful, valued for their color and heat. Pueblo communities of the American Southwest preserved peppers by smoking and sun-drying, a practice that left traces in the hearths of ancient pit houses. Each society shaped the pepper's flavor, strength, and meaning, selecting for traits that fit their climate, palate, and beliefs. By the time the plant would catch the eye of outsiders, it had already become a living archive of adaptation and ingenuity, rooted in thousands of years of cultivation and care. In January 1493, as Spanish ships traced their way back across the Atlantic, Christopher Columbus wrote of a remarkable plant he had encountered in the Caribbean, argi, a fiery fruit prized by the Taino people. He described it as more valuable than pepper, signaling a new kind of spice unknown to Europe. Just months later, living pepper plants arrived in Seville, carried by Diego Alvarez Chanca, the expedition's physician. Chanca's detailed report, sent from the bustling port in 1494, catalogued the pepper's heat and its curious effects on the body. These first specimens, still strange and pungent, entered the royal gardens and apothecaries of Spain as both curiosity and potential cure. The journey from Caribbean fields to Spanish court marked the first leap of Capsicum annuum beyond the Americas, a transfer not just of seeds, but of knowledge, flavor, and the promise of something entirely new. In these early years, the pepper's fate would be shaped by explorers' ambitions and the appetites of a continent eager for novelty. 16th century Europe greeted the pepper with a blend of scholarly excitement and puzzlement. Apothecaries and botanists, eager for new remedies and rare curiosities, gave the plant a place on their crowded shelves, sometimes as a substitute for the costly black pepper, sometimes as a supposed cure for fever or colic. Spanish physician Nicolas Monardes, writing in Seville in the 1560s, praised the Indian pepper as a potent medicinal, cataloguing its uses in his widely read treatises. Meanwhile, the royal physician Francisco Hernández, sent to New Spain by King Philip II, filled his field notes with careful drawings and clinical observations of the pepper's form and effects, though his findings would not reach print for decades. Across the Alps, German herbalist Leonhard Fuchs included one of the first European illustrations of capsicum in his 1542 compendium, describing its sharp bite and ornamental appeal. Pharmacy ledgers from Lisbon and Florence list dried capsicum as both a rare spice and a component in purgative powders. For the moment, the pepper remained more curiosity than kitchen staple, a bright, pungent specimen passed between scholars, healers, and collectors, waiting for the networks that would carry it eastward and deeper into European life. By the late 1500s, the Ottoman Empire stretched from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Black Sea, weaving new connections across Europe and Asia. Along these arteries of commerce, peppers from the New World began to appear not just as curiosities, but as commodities. Fiscal records from Buda in 1569, preserved in Ottoman defters, list kirmizi biber, red pepper, among taxable goods moving through the city's markets. These registers, written by unnamed officials, track the pepper's journey from Mediterranean ports through the Balkans, bundled alongside salt, rice, and coffee. Provisioning lists for Ottoman garrisons in the region detail shipments of spices, including capsicum, sent to supply both kitchens and apothecaries in outposts from Belgrade to Temesvar. The language of the registers shifts too, as the pepper is classified first as an exotic import, then as a staple for soldiers and traders. By the end of the 16th century, the flow of goods through Ottoman-controlled trade routes had placed the fiery fruit at the very doorstep of the Carpathian Basin. The logistical bridge was in place, setting the stage for the pepper's next transformation on Hungarian soil. In the villages scattered along the Tisza plain, paprika was woven into daily life long before it became a symbol of Hungarian pride. Families carried out the harvest together, stringing fresh peppers onto twine and hanging them from the eaves to dry in the late summer sun. The air around farmhouses filled with the faint, grassy sweetness of ripening pods, their color deepening from green to a rich, luminous red. Once dried, the peppers were brought inside, where women and children gathered by the kitchen hearth. With heavy stone mortars, they ground the brittle pods into a coarse, fragrant powder, a task that left red dust on hands and aprons alike. This homemade paprika flavored stews and soups, preserved sausage, and was sometimes mixed with lard as a simple spread. Folklore collected in the late 19th century recalls its use as a remedy for sore throats and toothaches. A pinch stirred into hot broth or pressed into a poultice. There was no standard recipe, no factory stamp, just the quiet rhythm of household labor and a spice that belonged as much to memory as to the meal. Along the banks of the Tisza River, the soil runs deep and golden, built from centuries of silt and sun. This land, with its loss-rich earth and long, warm summers, quietly became the cradle of a new kind of pepper. In the early 19th century, Franciscan monks in the lower town of Szeged began tending small plots of capsicum, drawing on monastic traditions of growing medicinal plants. Their garden records from the 1820s mention red peppers cultivated both for healing tinctures and for feeding the poor. Letters exchanged between the Szeged friars and the bishop in Kalocsa tell of robust harvests and the sharing of seedlings along the river. As the decades passed, these peppers moved from monastery gardens to open fields, where the Tisza Plains climate coaxed out a sweetness and color unmatched elsewhere. By the 1860s, paprika had become the pride of local markets. Kalocsa's market ledgers show that stalls selling the vivid red powder accounted for a growing share of the town's trade, with paprika soon rivaling wheat and tobacco as a regional export. In Szeged, municipal archives record the rise of paprika warehouses and the founding of export societies, each staking their reputation on the quality of their spice. The town's fortunes rose with paprikas, turning what began as a humble garden crop into the economic heart of the region. Here, paprika was no longer just a household flavor. It was a source of civic pride and the foundation for a new kind of prosperity. In the old paprika lofts of Szeged and Kalocsa, the air thickened with the scent of dried peppers and the steady scrape of knives. Each autumn, hundreds of women and children gathered at long wooden tables, their hands stained red from hours of splitting pods. The task demanded care. One slice along the length of each pepper, then a delicate sweep to strip away the pale membranes and seeds where the fiery capsaicin hid. Only the deep red flesh remained, destined to become the sweet powder prized in kitchens across Hungary. Oral histories from the interwar years recall the rhythm of this seasonal labor, the chatter, the aching fingers, the pride in transforming a sharp, biting fruit into something gentle enough for family stews. For many, this was the only paid work of the year, a few weeks that shaped both the flavor of a nation and the fortunes of its rural families. In the early 1930s, two brothers from Szeged set out to solve a problem that had long limited the reach of sweet paprika. József and Ferenc Pálffy, drawing on their experience in local mills, designed and patented a rotary dryer and pneumatic seed removal machine, patent numbers 1930112 and 193357. Their invention used a system of steel drums and controlled airflow to separate seeds from the pepper flesh, preserving the rich red color while slashing the hours of manual labor. Factory records show that sweet paprika output in Szeged more than tripled within 5 years. Newspapers called it a revolution, as uniform, vivid powder became available at a scale and consistency never seen before. The Pálffy machine set a new standard, laying the groundwork for the scientific breakthroughs that would soon follow. Albert Szent-Györgyi, working in his Szeged laboratory in the early 1930s, set out to solve a puzzle that had stumped scientists across Europe. He discovered that paprika pulp held extraordinary amounts of vitamin C, about 35 milligrams in every 100 grams, far more than citrus fruit. His careful notes, filled with measurements and observations, traced the path from bright red powder to molecular breakthrough. In 1937, the Nobel Committee honored Szent-Györgyi for isolating vitamin C, citing his work with paprika as essential to his discovery. A spice once valued for color and flavor now stood at the center of global science, its reputation forever changed. In Hungarian hands, a fiery American pepper became sweet, reshaping identity and science alike. Today, paprika's global journey still unfolds, each sprinkle a quiet reminder that borders shift, but culture adapts. The most familiar flavors often carry the wildest stories. What do you taste in a pinch of red?